morning. Thanks for giving us a minute as we get settled here. Always a pleasure to be back. We appreciate all the work that Travis does to put this event on, and Uinta County for giving us this opportunity. I am Rikki Hrenko-Browning. I'm the president of the Utah Petroleum Association. And this has been a little bit of a kind of, I think, 3 or 4 year tradition that we've had of bringing together the basin's top oil producers to talk about where we came from, where we are today, and what the future is going to look like. So I'll introduce my panel up here with me. So sitting to my right is Jason Pearce, who is the co-president and COO of Uinta Wax. Then we have Nick Tunnell, who is the VP of Operations for Scout Energy. Then we have Matthew Cooper, who is the CEO of Finley Resources. Next to him is James Lebeck, the Executive VP, Corporate Development and General Counsel for SM Energy. And then we have John Frey, who is the VP of Business Development and Land for FourPoint Energy. And Dan Brooks at the end, Land Manager, Uinta Basin in North Texas for Crescent Energy. So you've got a fantastic panel up in front of you here today. So I want to start by laying the scene and the groundwork a little bit. The last couple years, I have had the immense pleasure of being able to sit up here and say it has been another record-breaking year, and that is, in fact, the case. 2025 will be another record-breaking year, and we have had the pleasure of saying that since 2022, and that is really phenomenal and exciting. In the last few years, coming out of COVID, we have been able to double the state's crude production. We are now the 9th largest oil producer in the United States. And for those of you who are Uinta Basin residents or long-term visitors, you know that that's a very different place than we were not very long ago. So it has been very, very busy. It's also been really busy, and you'll notice we've got some new faces and new companies up here as well. So over the last about 13 months, we have seen $6 billion, that is with a B, $6 billion in merger and acquisition activity into the Uinta Basin, which is phenomenal and exciting. And I don't get to talk about billions very often, so I'm going to do it twice. The other $6 billion number that I want to flag is the amount of direct fees and taxes that all of you that support this industry have paid to the state of Utah in the last 5 years. So UPA updates our economic assessment every year. It's not GDP, it's not indirects and induced, it's the actual dollars in fees and taxes that our industry, that all of you make possible into the state of Utah and into local government. If you're interested in finding out more about that, our booth has our little one-pagers. There's QR codes, you can download that. But again, $6 billion over the last 5 years to support the local communities in the state, which is massive. So with that kind of laying the ground, let's get into our panel here. And John, I'm going to start with you. You're the new kid on the block. Welcome. Not too new anymore. But last year at this time, we had Uinta up here. So will you take a moment and just introduce us to FourPoint, who you guys are, and tell us a little bit about what your first impressions of the basin are. How's it going?
Sure. Thank you, Rikki. It's an honor to be here with everybody this morning. Thank you for the invite. Thank you for all the coordinators of the event. And it's an honor to share the stage with these esteemed colleagues. And it's also nice to see a group that can actually fill all the seats that are up here on this stage. So, headquartered in Denver, Colorado. FourPoint Energy is led by our CEO, George Solich, who has been leading private oil and gas companies for over 25 years, starting with Cordillera Energy Partners. If anybody knows that name, we rebranded from Cordillera to FourPoint in 2012 after we sold some assets to Apache Corporation. Historically, most of our operations have been in Texas and Oklahoma, the Mid-Continent, East Texas, Western Oklahoma, Texas Panhandle. But a lot of us are from the Rockies, a lot of us are from Denver, and a lot of us have deep roots in this area and in this region. Historically, private equity backed. This most recent venture, which underpins our investment in the Uinta Basin, is currently backed by Quantum Capital Group and Kane Anderson. We take a lot of pride in our deep technical work. We have a lot of scientists on our staff. We take a lot of pride in our reservoir work, our geology work, and our operations. And then we also try to be very intentional in authentic when it comes to building relationships with all our constituents in the basin, whether it be my peers here within the industry or everybody in the basin and really everybody that we conduct our business with. We take a lot of pride in that. So, and then I think, how is it going? Is that where?
How is it going? So, I'm sure you had a feeling of what you were walking into when you bought this asset. What are kind of the known issues and what have been the surprises? I'm sure that you're still thrilled.
I would say overall, it's going very, very well. And we are very thankful for the opportunity to have acquired the assets that we did from Uinta. We think that the basin's got a lot of great potential. We see a lot of value here. And overall, it's going very well. This is a tough business, though. Everybody knows that. None of us have a crystal ball. We had a pretty good idea of what we were getting into, and I think overall it's panning out pretty close to our expectations. With those challenges, though, come, you got to be nimble, and you got to be flexible, and you have to collaborate to solve all those challenges, which we do a lot at FourPoint. I would like to give a shout out to the team we have in Mighton. Our colleagues here in the field office are truly an exceptional bunch, most of whom have been with the asset for, I think, 20 plus years, going all the way back to the Newfield and Inland days. And they're truly an exceptional bunch. So we start there, and we collaborate to solve those problems together.
I love it. Welcome to the basin. You'll fit right in.
Thanks.
All right, Matthew, we're going to turn it over to you. I think an introduction is in order as well. So everyone knows Finley Resources. I suspect most of the people in this room have had the opportunity to meet Jim Finley. Congratulations are in order as the new CEO of Finley Resources. Do you want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your thoughts for the company moving forward?
Sure. Thanks, Rikki, and thanks for having me on. And also honored to be here with everyone. So, first of all, I think a lot of you have known Jim, and he's certainly spoke at a lot of events over the years. And he is not he's not going away by any means. He's still a huge part of this company, still the owner of the company, and very passionate about the Uinta Basin and everything that happens here. I have been with Jim since 2006, so almost 20 years. I started out as a landman right after college. I was a part of the first acquisition we made in the Uinta Basin in 2007. And so this is, another home to me. We love being here. We love all the people in the basin. We have a great group here in Roosevelt and Vernal. I've worked a lot of different roles. I'm a finance major with a law degree, so that's kind of a strange combination. So I've served as a landman, asset manager, general counsel, as a COO, and really worked a lot of the different Finley-owned companies, including on the Wildcat front. And I think the foundation of Finley is certainly not changing. We're still dedicated to the Uinta Basin. I think really the shift that you'll see from our strategy is historically we've been a vertical player here. We've drilled vertical wells since 2011. I think over 300 of them. But what you'll see from us going forward will be more of a horizontal program that we plan to kick off next year.
Thanks, Matthew. James, let's turn it over to you. This is year 2, just barely, at this event for SM. You've got a little bit of a better lay of the land now, but similar question to what I asked John. Based on what you thought coming in, and now you've got your arms around it, what are your thoughts about the basin, and how do you feel about things going forward?
Yeah, thanks, Rikki. Glad to be here. A year ago, we were just working on closing the acquisition from XCL. We closed October 1. So it's been a fast and furious year. Sorry, I wasn't here last year. We're working on closing the deal. For SM, we're a company that's been around since 1908, and we're proud to be in our second century. We have operated all over the continental U.S. Most recently, for about the last 10 years before this acquisition, we were focused mostly in the Permian Basin and in South Texas. But here, the Uinta is really our key third asset area. We have, similar to what John mentioned, we really believe in our subsurface capability, and the 4,000 feet of stacked pay in the basin was what really attracted us. We're currently running 3 rigs, and that's half the rigs that SM is running across the country, and the asset has been doing very, very well. We're very proud that almost everyone that had been on the XCL team chose to join us, and our team in Roosevelt, and combined with some folks in Denver, have been drilling great wells. We expect our kind of full design from spacing to completion and everything. We expect the first set of those wells to come online later this year or early next. And so we're excited to see how that works out. Obviously, we're very focused on the lower cube, but see real potential in the upper cube and then in the deep cube as well. So it's been going very, very well. We've been gaining some traction we're a public company. We've been gaining a fair amount of traction with our investors. It was interesting, in the second quarter, our cash margin, so the cash operating profit that we make for our Utah asset competes heads up with the Permian Basin. And so, as we speak to our investors, there's a lot of question and education that we have to get them because of high transportation costs and other things. And so people are very surprised when we point that out to them. And so I think every day we're educating the market about the basin, and we are very, very optimistic about the future.
It's exciting and good to hear. So Nick, I'm going to turn the time over to you. We've got a pretty big mix of folks up here: publicly traded, private equity folks. We've got single basin operators, multiple basin operators. Scout is not necessarily new to the basin, but has kind of quietly been growing the position. So do you want to speak a little bit about what makes Scout unique and how you approach some of these existing assets from an operational perspective to really enhance efficiencies and profitability?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rikki. Honored to be here. So Scout's a little bit different from some of the other private equity backed. I guess we're, private equity as well, but we kind of merged the model of kind of private equity groups that raise funds. We raise those funds directly and take those funds to acquire existing producing assets. So historically, we've typically been, acquiring 70 to 90% PDP type assets. And so that's kind of created a unique opportunity. We got into the basin in September of 2022 through the acquisition of the GMBU asset from Uinta. Anyway, being kind of a PDP acquirer, that was not their top tier acreage for horizontal development, which kind of created some opportunities for us to come in and put some more emphasis and focus on, reactivations, recompletions, optimizing the asset that may not have been the focus, for Uinta. We also saw the opportunity for horizontal development and kind of pushing those limits and expanding kind of the opportunities, further south. And so we quickly partnered up with WIM on a farm out. And so they've since drilled 21 horizontal wells on our GMBU acreage. We've done some similar type deals in West Texas as well. We acquired some assets from Chevron that had some horizontal development. Our funds are, funded, our development is funded out of cash flow, so we're not really set up to fund horizontal development. But a lot of our investors were excited about what they were seeing from the results with our deal with WIM and what we've done in West Texas, and so there was some interest in getting into kind of the horizontal, game as well. And so Juan Navarez, who previously kind of headed up our Utah operations, he has kind of headed up a team within Scout that has raised some funds to develop the additional horizontal acreage in partnership with WIM still. And so his team has just gotten off the ground. We just brought our first pad onto production a couple weeks ago. So we're excited about that, finishing up drilling on our second pad. And so moving forward there with a one rig program, but still continuing to focus on kind of the vertical production. We've been able to maintain pretty much flat production since acquisition, so that's something we're really proud of. A lot of that is focusing on kind of our field operations and empowering them to they've been here a lot longer than we have. Like John said, 20 years in the basin. A lot of our team was with the previous Uinta team anyway, and so leaned on them heavily. It's like, what are the opportunities here? What can we go after? We've done some unique things, purchased a workover rig, things to get more efficient. And so we're really excited. We've partnered up with some of the folks here as far as taking some water to help us reactivate injection wells and stabilize the water flood. We've done some water shutoffs and various different opportunities. So we're excited about the future and excited about what we've done to date. So.
That is the perfect segue to my next question. And Jason, I'm going to start with you, and then we'll go to Dan, and it'll be good to hear from everybody circling back around. The basin has a ton of opportunities, right? We're all very excited about what we've been able to accomplish the last couple of years. I know we don't have a crystal ball. I really wish I did. But as we look out, longer term, medium term, what do we think that the opportunity and the potential for this basin truly is? What could this basin be is kind of question number one. And Jason, I'm going to start with you again. And then as you go through, if each of you could just give everyone an idea of what more specifically, and some of you have touched on this already, do your development plans look like? How many rigs are you planning to run, or other investments or developments you're planning to make? Are there, water infrastructure projects or sand mines or transportation changes or maybe electrification? What are the big projects that you're looking forward to in the next couple of years as well?
Thanks, Rikki. Appreciate it. This basin I still think is somewhere around first or second base, and trying to figure out exactly what its potential is. You take basins like the Permian, Eagle Ford, Appalachia, some of those places that have been really active for the last 15, 20 years now. And I think they really understand the asset really well. There's been a lot of companies do a lot of different things. We're a fairly small basin, mostly confined to about 2 counties. Call it 1.5 million, 2 million acres. And you've really only had about 6 or 7 companies doing most of the work, whereas you've got the Permian, you've got hundreds of companies spread across trying different things. And so I really think that we're still trying to figure out what the potential is. And as it was mentioned, I can't remember who said it a minute ago, but 4,000 foot of stacked pay of just oily pay. You've got another 4,000 foot of gas pay underneath that, particularly to the east, but even in the middle of the basin potential. So I think we're still really early. I think 700 or 800 horizontal wells have been drilled now in the basin. You think about that across a few million acres, it's just not very much. So there's still a long way to go in just figuring out proper spacing, how many wells, how many landing zones are there. I think there's probably been 15 drilled, maybe. I may even be wrong, because I'm sure there's some data I don't have that others have here, but just with data we've got and watching what others are doing, I think there's probably been 15, 18 different targets tried up and down the basin. Some with great success, some with mixed results, but trying to figure out how those mix together. Certainly we've got a long ways to go, I think, in figuring all of that out, which is exciting, I think, which is why you saw the capital get injected into this basin, because there is an opportunity to get in before it's all figured out. Obviously, you see the Permian and places like that where once and again, I won't say they know everything, but once you kind of figure it out and kind of unlock the key to a lot of that stuff, the price obviously goes up because it becomes more competitive and people want to be there. And so it's a good thing for the basin. It will continue to push interest in the basin and as we figure things out. For UWAX specifically, we're running 2 rigs today. We actually picked up our second rig. We've been up and down from 1 to 2 rigs pretty much since we've been in the basin for about 6 years now. And we want to run as many rigs as possible. I'll say, that's always been kind of a difficult thing depending on prices, things like that. I think we've gotten better, more efficient, which has allowed us to do more with less as time's gone on. So even as we sit here in a kind of low to mid 60s environment, we're convicted in running a second rig right now. You heard SM say they're running 3 rigs right now. I think we're getting better at running our business every day in the basin and allowing us to do more with less. Our intention is to continue to run that, and we're looking for ways to potentially pick up a 3rd rig in the future. That's kind of our goal over the next 12 to 18 months, is to potentially get another rig in the air. And I think you'll hear similar stories as you go around here, everyone wanting to do more. Again, oil price being the big lever, I think, that that will drive a little bit of that decision making. Some of the projects that we've done here recently, we built a sand plant going back about 5 years ago that we've been using. We've continued to expand the potential of that. When we first started it, it was able to pretty much just cater to our business. Today, we've added a second dryer. We've found more resource. We've added more mining capability at the actual sand mine itself. I think we've got the ability to probably cater to 2 to 3 frac crews running full time if we needed to. So those are some of the investments we put in the ground recently to be able to run harder. Rail terminal that we own with some of the Finley folks. We just finished an expansion that took us from the ability to move about 40,000 barrels a day to almost 60,000 barrels a day today. And we're working on what that next phase looks like that potentially takes it to 100,000 barrels a day, be able to be railed out of the basin. Those are some of the big projects that we've really focused on, is trying to remove, as we sat here over the last few years, some of the roadblocks, impediments that were in the way just trying to make sure those things are not the throttles that keep us from doing what each of these companies wants to do in the basin. So that's really where we focus.
Yeah, thank you once again. I'll take a second. Yeah, Dan Brooks at Crescent Energy. Big thanks to our team out here, and Travis. As always, this is just a fantastic event, so thanks for having us, and this is just awesome. I would say for Crescent Energy, first and foremost, the Uinta Basin remains a major focus for our company. A lot of what the other folks have said is we have a long lineage of operators and predecessors in this basin. And I think what's critical for us right now is, I think it's fair to say for all of us up here that there was a period of learning how to drill these horizontal wells, which targets are working best. And I think we've elevated now into a sense of takeaway issues we've addressed in the last couple years, whether that's on the oil side or the gas side. And now we're really looking hard at levers to pull in terms of cost on maybe challenged transportation, whether that be through the sand, through water, power. But we're really looking at how do you take some of those challenged economics and really start to pull those levers and drivers on the cost side, which is really exciting because now you have a fundamental base of production, which we're about 25 to 30,000 BOE a day currently, which 2/3 of that's oil. So it's really exciting to kind of take that next step and to say, okay, we've got a firm understanding. At Crescent, we are being very patient and deliberate in our understanding of the rock and how it's being developed. And so I don't think you will ever see Crescent really trying to grow through the drill bit just to grow through the drill bit. And we're in really no sense of hurry in terms of bringing that production on. So it's a really exciting time around Crescent in learning what the next year and couple years forward look like. That's what I would offer on the Crescent side. And then you guys have all heard me talk about this before, is I think it's critically important at this point in the basin is all of us up here, albeit we maintain a healthy sense of competitiveness, that we're all driving towards the same common goals, be that takeaway, drivers of cost, macro level kind of basin-wide initiative. So it's exciting time.
John, you want to pick it up from there, and we'll kind of go around big picture potential of the basin and forward-looking plans for FourPoint?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I really like the way Jason put it, in that the basin is in maybe the first or second inning. I think at FourPoint we would certainly agree with that. And I think that's one thing that drove us to the Uinta Basin. That's something that attracted us to the Uinta Basin, because when you compare that to most of the basins in the country, they are in later innings. Right, and so in the early stages that the Uinta Basin is, I think we see a heck of a lot of opportunity. The resource is certainly very attractive. The geology is certainly attractive. I think why it is in the first or second inning, if you will, is it's been somewhat constrained by these logistical issues, whether it be takeaway, whether it be gas gathering, whether it be, I think, potentially regulation, just whatever it may be. I think that a lot of those constraints, if you will, are getting better. And I think that we see the opportunity for those logistical problems to allow the basin to grow and realize its true potential. So I would say overall, we're very bullish on the opportunity in front of us in the basin, and we think there's going to be hopefully some good growth coming out of the basin. It's subject to a lot of things, right? We don't have a crystal ball. It's subject to commodity prices. It's subject to well cost, subject to takeaway, subject to regulations staying and continuing to move in the right direction. It's subject to non-attainment. It's subject to infrastructure. That's why this is a hard business, as I previously said. But I would say overall, we're very excited about the opportunity that the basin has in front of it.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. It's why we're here. We in 2016, when SM bought our main Permian position in Howard County, at the time, all the analysts said, "Well, we're beyond the razor's edge. That the Permian Basin does not extend that far east." And we proved that they were wrong. And we see the same. Everyone knows there's great potential here, but we think there's even more. And so that's why we acquired the assets we did about a year ago. And in terms of our future plans, we're just working on our budget right now. I don't have anything to say about that. I would expect it to generally be fairly consistent. We're spending a lot of time thinking about how to reduce costs, how to improve economics, looking at drilling 3 and 4 mile laterals. We have our own sand mine. The team borrowed an idea from Atlas in West Texas and New Mexico. Maybe y'all have heard they have a 46-mile sand conveyor there. We only have an 800-foot sand conveyor, but we are conveying sand directly from our mine to our remote frac pad. And so that basically take a bunch of trucks off the road and save costs. So that's something that we're always exploring new and innovative ways to reduce our costs and enhance our returns. So that's what we're focused on.
Well, I think you're going to hear a lot of the same from me. I think we also believe there's a lot of growth left in the Uinta Basin. There are a lot of zones being drilled every year. I'm going to steal a stat from Shay Atkins, our EVP. I think every year since horizontal activity has been in the basin, there has been at least one new zone identified, drilled, and made commercial. And so if that continues, we can all imagine, how many more locations will be identified and the value creation that we'll see here in the Uinta Basin. So I think it's both within the column of pay. We will continue to see new zones identified, new targets, and then I agree. I think the geographic area that is being drilled will continue to grow. So I don't think the growth is over. I think it's going to be here to stay. And I think, a lot of us up here, a lot of the companies up here have done a lot to ensure that the infrastructure is there for that growth. Jason mentioned the Wildcat expansion. It's critical. All of us up here have to be able to sell these barrels and to move them to market in order to drill these wells, and it benefits everybody in the room. I think, specifically for Finley Resources, as I mentioned, we anticipate adding or establishing a rig at the beginning of 26, and looking out maybe a year and a half. That's our plan, and that's of course subject to everything John said. Prices and regulations and all the fun stuff we deal with. And just maybe highlighting another point that I thought was interesting. When you look at all the major basins in the United States, there's really only 2 that are having material growth, and that is the Uinta Basin and the Utica. Conveniently, both, U words, easy to remember. But I just think that's an incredible stat for this basin to be one of 2 growing basins in the United States. So.
Yeah, I think as I mentioned earlier, kind of our plans are kind of a 1-rig program for the foreseeable future. Right now, our focus is we've been fortunate with kind of the first 21 wells that we drilled with WIM to use existing infrastructure. So we're looking to expand some of our water and gas handling infrastructure to make sure we've got the capacity for for the additional drilling that we plan to do moving forward. So that's kind of our focus right now.
All right, so I'm going to flip this a little bit. We talked about the challenge or the opportunities, big opportunities, still early. I like the first to second base analogy. That's perfect. Let's talk about the challenges and the bottlenecks. So a couple years ago, one of the biggest bottlenecks that we always talked about was gas offtake, that we were actually having to shut in wells because we didn't have enough gas takeaway capacity, enough pipeline to be able to continue to operate. And we've seen a ton of investment into the basin. You heard from the panel yesterday morning from Williams of all of the investment they've brought into the basin. Yesterday was actually a big day for Kinder Morgan as well. Their Green River Pipeline project was up and running day one. So we have done a lot to debottleneck the basin, and particularly on the gas side. Matthew, I'm going to kick this back over to you. What are the big bottlenecks now? Is it electrification? Is it employees? What do we need? What's the next thing we're tackling?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I wish my crystal ball worked better also. But I think Rikki's right. I think we all saw it and experienced it. Gas was a major bottleneck, especially for the wax producers. And, you know, it's kind of an interesting dynamic. It wasn't that the infrastructure is here, it just wasn't in the right spot. And, you know, you want to wax in Uinta with the Brundage gas pipeline, did a lot to solve that problem, and Kinder's new project will certainly help. So, I think it was a little bumpy, but the bottleneck was solved, and there was some foresight to get ahead of that. And I think we saw that on the trucking side. I think especially Jim, he was a big advocate for this, but he saw that bottleneck coming also. And so Wildcat, I think, did a good job of being proactive and encouraging investment in the trucking side, both with drivers and actual truck equipment, and underwrote some of those things by guaranteeing work for those companies. And I think a lot of the people up here did the same thing. And so I think it's impressive to see both service providers and producers and midstream companies working together, anticipating bottlenecks and solving them before they're really a problem. I think future bottlenecks, I think with Wildcat's expansion and ability to layer on incremental expansion quickly, I don't see a bottleneck on the takeaway side for crude, for wax. I think gas is in a pretty good place for us wax producers. I think electricity is definitely one that probably everyone up here wished we had better access and more competitive electricity. That's something that we talk about a lot. It's something that makes both our operations run more efficiently and also reduces emissions, which we're all focused on. And, we've seen projects. We did a microgrid project in partnership with the Ute tribe that came online this year, where we put in power poles and power lines, connected about 40 wells to the grid. The grid is powered by both natural gas generation and solar. And I think that's a neat project, and it's kind of a behind-the-meter idea. And I think we'll see more of that, and I think that is a bottleneck. I think it's one we can solve locally with small projects, but one that would really could use a larger solution that could benefit more people. And I don't know that I had any other bottlenecks, Rikki, that were obvious. At workforce-wise, we're really lucky to be here. I think the workforce in this basin is incredible. Knowledgeable, hardworking, honest people with really good family values. And so I think the workforce is solid. I think we could all envision, with continued activity, that there could be strains on the workforce. but I think, you know, we've seen a very competitive environment for good, hardworking people. I don't think any of that's ever going to change here. And I think we all worry about, you know, new technologies and efficiency gains, and does that impact the number of jobs for ourselves, for the community. And, you know, I think it's a great place to be where we see so much growth. Even if there are those advancements, I still think a super strong job market, a strong workforce, and so I think it's a really positive thing for the basin, not a bottleneck.
Okay. So I would just want to hit on something that's come up a few times of, we're a small basin, we're a small group of players, but the real advantage to that is we can all come together and work on these bottlenecks when we see them, and we've had some really good success stories in doing that, working together, whether that was helping to underpin the investment needed to grow the transportation infrastructure, logistics, drivers, trucks, et cetera, kind of mapping out the gas takeaway needs on the pipeline front. So I think electrification, I completely agree, is probably our next big one. But we've got the right group of folks to come together to work on it together. And these are big, expensive, challenging, regulatorily complex issues, but I'm confident that this group of folks is going to continue to work together successfully on those. I want to go back to the transportation piece, and Jason, I'm going to turn this over to you. So with the expansion at Wildcat, plus, you know, we've got Price River Terminal, plus we've got some other projects that have been announced, and we'll see where those come into play. I sometimes get questions about, is trucking a bottleneck? Is transportation a bottleneck? Can you speak to that a little bit more and talk, you know, is there anything that we need to do from a logistics or a batching or an infrastructure model, or are things kind of moving along smoothly in your view with the opportunity to continue to grow?
Yeah, thanks. Great question. Obviously, trucks, as mentioned, what was a big bottleneck probably 3 or 4 years ago as our rail takeaway was expanding, as production was expanding. That was a big concern because the basin had always moved 80 to 90,000 barrels a day to Salt Lake City, and that was it. It would occasionally you'd bump up against that number, and then you'd drop down and bump back up, and it just, you knew it was there. You could count on it. You didn't need more, didn't need less. But as we grew over the last, really since coming out of COVID, you know, today I think the basin, again, I may get this number slightly wrong based on public and kind of some of the things we put together. I think the basin today produces about 190,000 barrels a day, give or take. So that's plus or minus 100,000 barrels a day going to rail, and still the 80 to 90,000 barrels a day going to Salt Lake City. So we're actually railing more out of the basin today than goes to Salt Lake City. You know, going back to some of the metrics that Rikki gave early on, I mean, I think that's incredible. You know, just 5-6 years ago, there was no sight to more than 80 or 90,000 barrels a day going out of the basin. And today we move more. So I think that's awesome between, you know, the two different rail terminals and just everything that's come together to make that work, and the capital that's been invested to bring those barrels forward. To the trucking side, a couple things. I'll say one thing. To move the amount of barrels today, aside from us actually getting somehow to be able to move more barrels per truck, today you're still going to see the same number of trucks going, you know, to the terminals. The big thing that I think we are working on at Wildcat, I think PRT's got some of that in place. But, you know, for us, right now we've got mobile transloaders that we're loading into. I think our next big expansion that takes us from roughly 60,000 barrels a day today to kind of that 100,000 barrels a day is we're working on the installation of tanks and offload racks and places for multiple trucks to come in at one time with LACT units such that with pumps. So our big issue right now is we've got enough trucks to move what we move, but there is on any given day between wait times, between just offload times, per shift, there's roughly about 7 hours of idle time per truck. And so we think with some of the improvements that we're doing at Wildcat and some of them that I know PRT is always working and trying to get better and more efficient as well, we think we can add at least a load per day per truck. And so while the number of loads going across won't necessarily change, I mean, a load without winter conditions is still, call it, 250, 270 barrels. That's going to stay standard, but I think we can do it with less trucks as we add the number of loads per truck. And so the number of trucks we got today, I think we'll be able to move 30 to 40% more barrels in the future than they are today. So that's kind of the big thing for us. There's a lot of things in the field as well that we've done, and I'm sure others have, from LAC units at wellheads, particularly at multi-well pads, that allow for quicker offload into the trucks, things like that, just reducing all the idle time that exists in the trucking world. Some of the road work that's being done on 191, and then, eventually, hopefully, some work being done at the 191 Highway 6 interchange there to make that a more efficient. I think just all these things, reducing the idle time for the trucks are the big deal, over the next several years, and trying to get where the number of trucks we've got today can handle 30, 40, 50% more barrel as they come online over the next 3 or 4 years.
It's an incredible example of some of the things that we can do to improve the cost basis, improve the efficiency of the basin, that are not necessarily big, shiny, sexy projects, but really make a difference. I want to look the other way for just a minute, not too long, Dan, but I'm going to turn this over to you. You're kind of one of the veterans in the basin at this point. You were here prior to this great trajectory that we're on. You've lived through some of the booms and the busts and seen what the basin used to be as well. Are there things that you could foresee that you are kind of keeping always front and center that could take us back to where the basin used to be, whether it's one thing or a series of events that we think we all just need to keep front and center and be appreciative and cognizant of?
Yeah, no, good question. And yes, it has been a good long run. And Matthew mentioned your acquisition back in 2007. And I think one of our predecessors was actually on the other side of that. So I think we share that. So I think I would answer that question, Rikki, in maybe 3 buckets, if you will. And just to keep it real simple, I think kind of from a micro level, us sitting up here and those in the room, and more of a macro level. And then I would add a 3rd bucket would be kind of more relationships and community. So I think on the micro level, and this is going to sound a little familiar, what I said before, is I think we have a great opportunity. It wasn't long ago in this basin from these folks sitting up here and or predecessors where it was very ultra competitive, and it was a very much, I'll stay in my lane, you guys stay in your lane until we get in each other's lane. And so now I think it's much more of a collaborative approach, as you've heard me say. And so I think, and I'm not suggesting that competitiveness is not needed, because it very much is. But I think if we all start driving in our own directions and kind of doing different things, I think we can set the whole collective of the basin off on a little different trail. So I think maintaining that sense of collaboration from driving the basin forward. On a macro level, I would say, be it city, county, state, tribal, federal, I don't generally like to generalize policy, but policy. I think we all have to be mindful as an entire basin, as an entire community of operators and general community, of any sort of changes and maybe fixes, and as we're trying to address certain issues. And I think we have to be very mindful of what truly is driving, what are we trying to fix, and then how do we implement these fixes? Because I think we could all be set back as if we're chasing kind of the next shiny slogan or short-term fix. I think, being mindful of how that impacts not only us as operators in the community, but our downstream folks on the refiner side as well. So I think we have to just be very mindful of, again, what's coming from the different policymakers. And then this one hits near and dear, and John touched on it too, on relationships. As many of you guys know, I'm a Wyoming guy originally. I live in Houston now. My 2 young boys at home talk all about Wyoming all the time because Daddy's from Wyoming. In the recent past, they're talking more about Utah than they are Wyoming, so that's in large part to this room, and I'm proud to be a part of this community. But it's a sense of true, genuine relationships and being up here and being part of this community and truly driving this thing forward with all of us, because I would take a bet that there's not one table in here that doesn't either work in the industry or has family ties to the industry, and probably has for a generation or two. And so that's critically important. And I think, too, on that side of things is if we start to get misaligned on the community side versus what we're trying to do up here, I think that starts to send us in this motion of maybe getting misaligned and getting out of whack. So, again, I think to summarize, I would say, maintaining our sense of competitiveness, but collaboration. And then at the macro level, just being mindful of what's going on around us and the true why that's happening. And then just doing exactly what we're doing right now, just maintaining this sense of community and why we're here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with all of that more. Very well said. I want to take a moment and talk a little bit about air quality, and we've got a slide if we could cue it up, because for me that's also one of the real big risk factors that could be a brake on the ability to continue to grow the basin. You heard a lot about this yesterday from a great panel that Dr. Seth Lyman at Utah State University talked about, and for me the big takeaway from that discussion was that graph he showed where you had emission reductions going down, you had production going up. That is a huge accomplishment and something that you all should be incredibly proud of, that we have been able to decouple production growth from emission growth. And that's something that we have got to be very mindful of how we can continue to sustain that as we talk about more aggressive development of the basin and as we talk about growing gas production in the basin as well. That is absolutely front and center and critical. And so a couple years back, 2022, UPA stood up an effort together with our producers called Latch the Hatch. And I was very appreciative to hear that called out a couple times yesterday, and that's something that folks are aware of that we're doing. So you can see on that top left quadrant on that slide all of the folks that are supportive and actively engaged in this program. And we talked about all the change that's been coming to the basin, the different operators over the last couple of years. One thing that's really heartening to me is even despite all of that change of operators, we've grown the program 22% in the last year in terms of the number of folks that are actively engaged in the program. Everybody gets it. Everybody understands the importance of investing in air quality, and that was not necessarily the case 5-6 years ago. So that's kind of a huge underpinning for me. And as we look at other kind of attributes of the program, you'll see that it's a kind of a small group of logos up there on that front left side, but that goes back to what we talked about before of there's a handful of producers here in the basin. And so when we look at the amount of production that is covered by the folks supporting this program, we've got more than 95% of the production in the basin, oil and gas combined, that are members of this program. And it's actually closer to 98% if we just look at oil. So we're reaching a point of saturation, which is fantastic. So the way this program works is it's really a menu of options. You heard from Jeanette Liang with FourPoint yesterday about the long list of alphabet soup of all of the regulatory requirements. This is on top of that. This is voluntary, and it goes above and beyond regulatory compliance. But it is a requirement. So operators get to choose from a menu of options you can see on that top right slide of things they're going to invest in that are going to move the needle on air quality. And then we hold feet to the fire on that. We do track that. Some of the things that we've seen that have been growing over the last couple of years, a lot more signage, high quality gaskets, alarms to indicate when thief hatches are open so we can get those closed right away, tanks with sensors and alarms, lacked units. We talked about lacked units up here. You're going to hear more about that as we drill larger wells, more pads. Those make more sense. They're more cost effective, and they make a big difference in terms of emissions and operational efficiency and safety. One thing that I think we've hit a saturation point on, and I say that in the best of ways, is on our hauler commitments and engagements. I think we've got a lot of our haulers into the program that understand their role in this and the importance and are engaged and are supportive. So if we go to the next slide, I'm just going to take this opportunity. We're going to hear more about this, or our members are going to hear more about this from me soon. But one of the things we also talk about is an annual refresher. It's this time of year where we're in the fall that we encourage all of our members to think about what you can do this winter. So USU does an amazing job with their ozone alert program. I would encourage each and every one of you to sign up. I'm personally signed up. They will let you know that there's an ozone event coming, what the likelihood of that event is going to be, how long it will last, and when it is over. And so what we encourage all of our members to do is already today come up with a plan of things that you can do when you get one of those ozone alerts. Train your teams on it. Have an actionable plan so that when you get that alert, you know exactly what to do. It may only be 2 or 3 days in a given year, but if we can all work together on those 2 or 3 days where we're going to have a high ozone event, that significantly changes the trajectory of what we're going to be able to do in the basin. 2 or 3 days can be what makes or breaks a year. The way the regulatory compliance works is a 3-year rolling average. So 3 days can literally chart the trajectory for this basin over a decade. I don't want to overkill you on air quality. I know you heard a lot about it yesterday. But it really matters, and everybody doing their part is going to be needed for us to be able to continue to grow the basin in the way that these folks have talked about wanting to do. So I just want to give a shout out again to the panel yesterday. We had Mike Natchez up there, Jeanette Liang. We had Chris Koklasher, Sheila Vance, Seth Lyman. That is a group of mavens that are truly experts in their fields. They're well respected in the community. They're the folks that live and breathe this. And I would encourage, if you have any questions, that's a great group of folks to go to get up to speed and understand what you could be doing to make a difference there. So that's my little pitch on Latch the Hatch. We can take the slide down now. But with that, I want to turn it back to the panel and talk about air quality real quick. Just, are there a few things that you want to highlight that your company's doing that you think has really moved the needle, or that you're excited about or investing in the future? And maybe, Jason, we'll just kind of start with you and go along.
Sure. I apologize. I'm in this weird state in my life where I can see all of y'all perfectly, but I can't read anything in front of my eyes. So I'm gonna pull my notes out here real quick, just because we've got a lot of things that have gone on that I'd really like to kind of get right for the guys that have worked on it. But yeah, as Rikki mentioned, I mean, air emissions have become critically important to the basin, to the community, and to the operators in the basin as well. I mean, the regulatory world is getting tougher when it comes to that. You know, and I don't think that's changed a whole lot with change in administrations. I do think there's a better understanding, a willingness to talk about it, but I still think the standards are the standard, and an expectation that emissions will continue to decrease and get better. With that, you know, Uinta Wax has done a lot over the last 4 or 5 years. You know, we came out of COVID. We had a lot of production shut in COVID, and so it wasn't a huge issue. But as we started bringing that on, as we picked up a rig in late 2020, started drilling, started permitting multi-well pads in particular. It was one thing when you're drilling single well pads from an emissions standpoint, much easier to control, but starting to drill 4, 5, 6, in some cases drilling 10, 12, 14 well pads, you know, those things become critically important in those controls. So some of the things that we've done over the last few years, you know, we went out and we replaced 150 pneumatic chemical injection pumps with solar pumps, you know, little things like that add up. I think that was somewhere in the neighborhood of 170 tons of VOCs, 270 metric tons of methane reduced. We converted more than 2,500 pneumatic devices to non-venting on site. You know, that took us the better part of about 2.5 years to go through that process, and millions of dollars. But you know, and again, that's potentially in the thousands of VOCs reduced annually, and similar metric tons of methane. Just on pneumatic devices, running valves, things like that, it adds up, because we've all got, you know, tens of them on locations, if not more than that. It adds up pretty quickly. We replaced and removed all of our multi-cylinder pumping unit engines, our A90s, A54s. They just emission problem. They couldn't pass tests. So we've removed and or shut in all those and have replaced them, which again, it was a huge 7,500, the count that we had, we ended up reducing 7,500 metric tons of CO2 in the field with that. The two big projects we've done recently, we installed 2 MRUs, mechanical refrigeration units in the field at our major compression sites for our return gas or field use gas, pulling the liquids out of that such that all of our engines, everywhere that we're using it, we're burning a much leaner gas, again, reducing, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,500 tons of VOC and about 180 tons of NOx just by reducing those liquids going back that we're burning. Those are some of the big things we've done over the last 3 or 4 years. And to Ricky's point, I don't have a chart sitting in front of us, but we've got some very indicative charts that our production since we've been in the basin has gone up about 80%, and our emissions have dropped by more than half. I mean, they're down significantly, and so that trend is pretty amazing considering the production growth. And I think you'll see that across all of these guys as they talk. We're a part of a semi-annual LIDAR survey, aerial survey, so that we can catch things quicker, understand where we've got problems that maybe we don't see day in and day out, and just address those as quickly as possible. Those are the big things I think that we've done, and that we're continuing to look at doing more, continuing to look for opportunities to reduce emissions anywhere we can. So.
Yeah, I think for us, our main focus is kind of building out our staff for LDAR inspections. So we've done, close to 1,200 inspections this year. We're continuing to look at, all of our Kimmery valves, T12 valves, and looking at new technology. A lot of our production is more stripper type production, and so the economics are a little bit more challenging. So we think the LDAR inspections and just staying on top of that is critical and the most economically feasible for us to pursue at this point. But continuing to look into new technology and things that we can do to change out, our existing infrastructure to improve that.
And Matthew, just before you start, I want to interject. That's a really important point of, some of us have legacy vertical assets. Some of us have big, new, large multi-well pads. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. And the way we address this has got to be really flexible and creative. It's a good point, Nick.
Yeah, no, exactly. Anyway, it's not feasible for us to apply all new technology to, a well that makes 2-3 barrels a day. And so that's something we're always cognitive of, but, always talking to different people about what's out there, kind of as that becomes more affordable, evaluating those options as they present themselves.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and it's, these regulations and our efforts have to be practical, and they have to be achievable, and we have limitations like that, and we see that as well on legacy wells that are later on in life. But I think Jason hit on a lot of the technical things that UNWAX has done, and Finley has followed suit in a lot of those avenues as well. But I think a lot of it is just being practical, and Rikki talked about latch the hatch. And Mike Natchez was a big supporter and an advocate, and that's an easy thing for us to do. It's something we can see. We can encourage and motivate our guys in the field to enforce it, and so we try to be really practical on that front. Latch the hatch where we can be more efficient and not have individual well pad generation for electricity, where we can use more efficient engines. Even engine maintenance is a big deal. I mean, just maintaining the engines we have on our pumping units can really cut down on emissions. And so we think about those things and try to be very practical about the best ways to lower emissions. And I think what we saw from Latch the Hatch was with the UPA getting everyone on board and Rikki really being the big advocate, we all can enforce that, and we saw just a kind of shift change in that across the basin. It was important to everyone and every company. And so we see the same thing. One of the things we do now, and we've been doing for a little while, is every time a truck comes on location to pick up a load of oil or arrives at Wildcat to unload, the venting process when you're moving the barrel from either the tank to the truck or the truck to the train is another way for emissions to occur. And so we are very strict in enforcing that there will be a vent line connected back to the tank or back to the truck, depending on which move it is. And it's a zero tolerance policy. We enforce that, and it's a requirement of ours. And so I think the practical enforcement of really common sense ways to cut down on emissions is a big part of the success we've all seen in this basin.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add is as we've integrated our team between Texas and Utah and applied learnings both ways, we hold ourselves out as a premier operator of top-tier assets. And what we say premier operator means is you've got to be good at the environmental stewardship aspect. And I take personal pride, and I know our team takes a lot of pride in the latch the hatch approach. It impacts all of our operations here as the potential for subpart W reporting may be transitioning. I think it's important that we all recognize we're doing it for a whole lot of reasons other than just what we report to the EPA and how, at least for us as a public company, how our investors may track our performance on emissions. So it's just a practical part of life, and upholding ourselves to that standard that SM does and that all of us do here. I take great pride in that. So we're doing all the things that all of my peers here mentioned, but it's a unique aspect here in the basin and why I think it's important.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. I would say at FourPoint, we take air emissions very seriously. And it was touched on yesterday in our panel. It's not because we're responding to a complaint or because we've become delinquent on something. It's because it's the right thing to do. A lot of us are from Colorado. A lot of us are from the Rocky Mountain region. We're outdoorsmen. We want to hunt, fish, and enjoy the outdoors just like everybody else. So we take it very, very seriously. The way we do that is by effectively walking the walk. You heard from my colleague Jeanette Liang yesterday. She mentioned AVO. I had no idea what that was until she told me that's auditory, visual, and olfactory. So what that means is we really get boots on the ground out there on our locations with great frequency, just looking at stuff, smelling stuff, and hearing stuff. And to the extent we detect a leak or a problem, our remediation time on those incidences is less than a half a day. So that tells us two things, both of which we really like. First of all, to the extent we have an incident, it's a minor incident. And then to the extent we have an incident, we're responsive to it. So that's what FourPoint would offer.
And similar, I would add from our Crescent Energy side is very similar to what the other operators have said. And we were actually having a chat over breakfast this morning, and in the massive increase percentage-wise of VRUs over the last 5 years for us. And what became very apparent to our team as we talked through that at breakfast is you talk through these things, latch the hatch, you're constantly improving things, and then all of a sudden you do take this step change where it becomes a way of life, right? It's a safety culture, it's an emissions culture, and our guys and gals out in the field are doing these things for the right reasons, and it's to improve on these little things, not because, to your point, it's a complaint or we have to do it. It's because that's the culture we've created, and I think that's what we've all benefited from in this basin is really that turning over of, hey, we're doing these things for the right reasons. So that's what I would add.
I love that. So as you can hear, these are folks that are walking the walk, not just talking the talk, and that's what has been able to really drive down those emissions at the same time that we're growing production. So we're excited and confident we're going to be able to continue that going forward. Speaking of stewardship and environmental responsibility, let's talk a little bit about water. And James, I'm going to turn this over to you. A few years ago, we had a legislative change, and big thanks to our legislators out there who supported this. They gave us a little bit of a different paradigm of how we can look at our water use and a little more regulatory certainty. And James, do you want to tell the SM story on water recycle?
Sure. It's really a story that we're continuing the success from our colleagues with XCL. Given our concentrated land position, we have a pretty unique, or at least proud of our water infrastructure facilities. We've spent about $100 million installing pipelines and the ability to take all of our produced water and then move it to our hydraulic fracturing fleet. We make about, let me make sure I get this right, about 120,000 barrels a day of produced water, and depending upon whether we're running single or double barrel frac, we use about 100,000 barrels a day. Not all the water it doesn't all make it to the frac fleet, but we are very proud of the amount that we're able to recycle. It exceeds what we're able to do in our other two regions of the company. And as Rikki mentioned, part of that is the regulatory certainty and being able to do that. That's why we're able to spend all the money, and as we continue to build out our portion of the field, we will continue to spend the money to expand that infrastructure. So it helps us greatly reduce the amount of fresh water we would otherwise have to use, and significantly reduce, obviously, the amount of wastewater we'd be injecting. So it's a big win for us.
Utah is one of the driest states in the nation, so this is, as we look at ways to save money and to improve our footprint, I think you're going to hear more from folks on the water space as well. All right, we're going to have one last question, so folks start thinking about questions that you want to ask folks. We'll do a little Q&A at the end here, but I'm going to throw this out to anybody that wants to answer it. We've seen a pretty big swing in the political pendulum at the federal level. It's great to have an environment that is supportive of our industry, that wants to see energy dominance and a growth in production. I'd be curious to hear from any of you who are willing to share kind of how it's been to work with the federal government since this change in administration just in January. It's a short period of time, but things have been moving fast. So any reflections or thoughts of how that interaction has changed or shifted, and pros or cons?
I'll start. I think first thing I'd say that is probably a little unique is the local and regional offices of the federal government, whether it's the BIA or the BLM, here are very unique in our experience. And so really, regardless of who's in charge, we've had a great experience working with the local offices, both BLM and BIA. So that is probably not something most other players in other basins can say. And it just kind of a shout out for how good of a job they do. They work hard all the time, even when they don't necessarily have all the resources they need to do what's asked of them. But I think, yeah, obviously we've seen a shift. I think everyone up here has been able to accomplish what they needed to, regardless of who is in power in Washington. But it is refreshing to see at least a more pro-energy government. I think there's still a lot of things that could be improved. I think staffing is one. And I think just really activating all the rules and policies all the way down to the ground level and the practical level would be great to see, and hopefully we continue to see that. But yeah, I think it's a positive shift, and I think we've had a better experience overall since November. Yeah.
Anybody have anything they want to add? Jason?
Yeah, I'll say, I echo what Matthew said. It is certainly, the tone has changed, the rhetoric has certainly changed from the top down. There's been some delays, I think, in actually seeing the benefits of that, whether it be finally getting the right people in place, getting them through the whole political, appointee process, all those kinds of things. And really, as Matthew said, getting that to trickle down to the staff level that's actually, it's one thing for President Trump to stand up there and say, I want this, but unless it gets all the way down to the local level and everyone buys into it, I think it's still just a talking point more than, making progress towards actually achieving some of those desires. And so that's probably the biggest thing, is just continuing to get that message all the way down, and guidelines around how to make that happen. You know, it's one thing to say it, but it's another to have the message be, this is either the regulation that we're going to change or what we're going to do and it's in place, or, you know, just the message to those folks to go, I don't want to see this happen anymore. Let's go down this path or whatever. I think that's where we're at today. Is I think the messaging's there, but I still think getting all the way down to the local level of the federal government for those of us that we deal with. I mean, none of us are talking to Trump or Zeldin personally day in and day out, but all those folks as it comes under them, just getting that message down and their ability to actually make things happen is, I think, the next step. And hopefully that's starting to happen and will happen over the next several months, hopefully maybe even by the end of the year. And you start to see, I think, the pendulum swing where some of the regulation that has impeded and or driven costs up and things like that, you start to see some alleviation of that. So
I'll kind of reiterate what both of them have said. We stepped into a little bit of a unique situation when we acquired our GMBU asset with a high inactive well count. And really the local kind of federal government partnered with us and kind of, we made commitments as far as kind of what their expectations were on reactivating wells, and we've continued to exceed that. But it was a very practical, common sense solution in a partnership and kind of working with us to kind of show that we were going to do what we said we were going to do and kind of not, you know, overstep in terms of kind of the pace at which we reactivated. But we've reactivated over 460 injection wells and, you know, continue to plug and reactivate over 40 wells a year. And so it's really been a partnership. And so even, you know, on the permitting side, they've been extremely helpful in trying to push things through. And so, yeah, I think that's something that's very unique to this basin, so versus what you see in other areas. So.
Yeah, for us at FourPoint, maybe it brings the conversation a bit full circle, and that word again is relationships. You know, we're the new guy. We've only been here about 9 months. We've tried to have a frequent presence out here, and hopefully a lot of the individuals in the room here from BIA, BLM, while not a federal agency, you dog them, felt that. And everybody's been very welcoming and gracious, allowing us to come in and spend some time with you. So overall, I would categorize our experience as excellent. A shout out to Spencer Kimball, our government affairs individual at FourPoint, who's in the audience. You know, he drags me around all over the place, including to Washington, D.C., and I think everywhere we go, you feel an exuberance and, you know, breath of fresh air, if you will. I would say overall the federal dynamic that we experience at FourPoint right now is extremely positive and receptive to our industry.
Appreciate that. Oh, go ahead, Dan.
Echoing what Matthew said, yes, big thanks to our local David Murray and his team at Energy and Minerals, and Sean Worcester at BIA, and then Jerry Kenska here at the BLM. Like, we couldn't do what we do without those relationships. So major thanks to you guys on that front. And then I will kind of circle back to what I was saying is it is a very pro environment right now. And again, back to my comment earlier, I just think we need to be mindful as a community as things come about that may not necessarily counter to that policy, but as we're trying to fix things at more of a local level and state or federal, just making sure that we're all trying to drive towards that common goal, and we don't inadvertently sidetrack ourselves from that.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, you know, it's a big beast. It's a big ship. It turns slowly. I think we forget of how short of a period of time we've had a change of administration. But one thing that we do as an industry that each and every one of you do is make sure that we're making prudent business decisions first and foremost. Yes, there's opportunities to take advantage of the current political climate that is supportive of us. But at the end of the day, we've got to be able to live through pendulum swings on both sides, and we've got to be able to operate sustainably and profitably. And so what drives a lot of our local business decisions is always going to be doing the right thing and making prudent business decisions regardless of what administration is in place. That being said, we sure are hoping that we hear a reconsideration decision on the Uinta Basin ozone sometime soon. So there are definite things that outside of those prudent business decisions are kind of out of our hands to a certain extent, and we are very appreciative of the current political climate. All right, well with that, is there any last thoughts, or should we move into question and answer? Do we have any last thoughts from the panel? Okay, do we have any questions from the audience? And if not, we're happy to give you guys back some time to network and have a break. Oh, we do have one. Al, there were microphones up here yesterday. I'm going to do a quick repeat and summary of that, so just so everybody can hear. So shout out to Seth Lyman and kind of his expertise on the air quality situation, but from the University of Utah position, highlighting the great experience at EGI in terms of petrogeology, and are there things that you all could be doing from the university, from the research side, that are supportive of industry?
Number one, thank you for the question. I think all of us would thank for the question. I think it goes back to just I don't have anything in specific to say right now, but I would say that continued engagement, 100%. And we will take that back to the team and certainly follow up. But I think just offering the question is huge. So thank you.
You know, I think one of the ways that we've seen EGI be really helpful, and we don't have them up here with us today, but Urban Energy, for example, is trying to develop a carbon sequestration project here in the state of Utah, and they've partnered really closely with EGI. There's been a lot of technical and resource sharing, and I think you're going to start hearing more about Urban's project coming up. It's kind of at the early phases, but there's definitely been a history of a strong relationship between the universities and our industry, and how we can continue to work together and grow together. So the question is, if the rail project does come through, how does it change our industry? Would it kind of change our forward-looking plans?
That's sort of a tough one to answer a little bit, in that we've got a couple issues. One, we don't know enough data about the rail to know what that looks like. What's the cost? Those kinds of things. So, you know, to say it's beneficial or not beneficial, I can't say. Would it be used if it were competitive? I think it probably would. You know, a little bit of the problem still with it, we still have to put our crude on trucks no matter what, whether it's going to Helper or Price, or if it's going to a terminal somewhere in Mighton, or, you know, somewhere in that area in the basin. You've still got to put it on crude from location, put it on truck, sorry, from location to the terminal. And so it's you know, and there's a minimal price to put it on truck, whether you're moving it a mile or you're moving it 90 miles, you know. And so that's kind of, you know, I'm not sure it's really answering it, but I do think it's, if it were there and it were competitive and it were something beneficial, I think not only to the community, but to the operators sitting up here, I think it would be something that were used. You know, the rail terminals are here not necessarily as a profit center for the companies. It was really a means to an end. You know, I'm not going to dive into all of the financials of Wildcat in particular, but I can tell you the first few years was more of a cash loser than a cash winner. And that was really, we shared costs with all the operators just to make sure that we could move the barrels and we could grow and we could prove the concept and we could continue to get all of the destination, buyers, refiners, the Exxons, the Shells, the Marathons, go down the list of refiners that want this product, but trying to give them the opportunity to have it and want it. And there's a huge desire for it. But to the in-basin rail, I don't know that we all have enough answers today to tell you the benefits plus or minus of having it. I have no doubt that there are other benefits other than oil and gas for it if it were to come. But for us specifically, it's just not an answer I can give concisely today.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I think that's another really good proof point. And sometimes there are things that are not big and shiny and sexy that our industry is able to do that really moves the needle. Being able to grow the production to double the production in the state, it wasn't some miracle technology breakthrough. It was the hard work of figuring out the marketing and how to move the barrels. And the industry couldn't wait for rail to come in to do that. If we were going to grow, we needed to just put our heads down and figure that out, and we did that. And so, as with everything in life, timing is a big part of it, right? We've got more capacity on the current offload facilities than what we need today. We've got room to grow into it. We'll see what the future brings. As Jason said, we'll see what the economics look like. We don't know what that looks like. If it's economically viable, we're certainly always going to consider anything on a cost basis. I'll repeat it for the benefit of the recording. So the question was about knowing that we're going to continue to see a lot of growth in the basin. We're only, kind of rounding first or second base. That's going to mean a lot of additional produced water. Talked a little bit about how we're recycling some of our produced water, but where is everybody at in terms of where all of that increased produced water is going to go for disposal? It's a great question.
So I'll start for Scout. We're fortunate that we have a water flood where our horizontal development is, and so we're taking some third-party water, but we still have 500 shut-in injection wells. And so with kind of our future development coming forward, we're planning on reactivating up to another 250 of those, but still have some more capacity there and adding on some infrastructure. So I think we're well positioned to take additional water there as well.
Nick, we may need to talk about that. I kind of glanced over the infrastructure. For us at FourPoint, I think, it probably comes down to infrastructure. I think we are a little less developed on the infrastructure side when compared to some of our peers in the basin, and we're currently evaluating a lot of investments on the water side. Water recycle, we're considering some SWDs. It's probably a myriad of different solutions, which is mostly reuse of produced water and then some SWDs, and maybe Nick and I talking about 200 injectors that you have in the unit.
Yeah, I think that's probably right for folks. The first priority is probably going to be water recycle as much as we can, and we have the benefit of being, as we said, early in this basin to have some lessons learned from some other basins about how best practices of managing that produced water and some of the challenges associated with reinjection work. So I think you'll see a lot more water recycle, and it's going to depend on how many rigs we're running as well, right? If we can easily funnel that back into completions, that's a really efficient way to deal with that water. Other questions? Reed. All right, How are we looking at NGL capacity? Where's pressurized loads going? What do the economics look like for offtake?
Reed, I think that's a good question, and probably something I skipped over when we talked about bottlenecks a little bit. I don't think the takeaway is necessarily it's not that there's not capacity to move those barrels, and there's actually, I think, a lot of local demand for some of those products. But I do think that some of that infrastructure is not completely built out. So I think, truck to pipe stations could be improved. We've seen Utah Gas Corp, invest in that. Some of those are a little further away from the production, so there's some obstacles there. But I think there is room for improvement there, Reed. I think it's a good question. I think we've all been getting by, but I think there'll be future investment there.
Probably have time for one or two more. A question on your offtake commitments, how those work, what the timelines are, and your kind of interest and flexibility in working with multiple different parties. We've got, lots of people named, Savage, Wildcat, UBRY project, et cetera.
Another good question. I think it's a little unique here, at least for our company, when we started thinking about moving wax by rail. I think historically for most of us, when we had a full tank at our production facility, you made a phone call and it was picked up and you never thought about it again. And that doesn't work in this basin. It's more complicated. The barrel has to travel a long way. And there's a lot of expenses and a lot of planning that has to happen for that to work. And it's both origination terminals here locally, it's rail cars. Those leases are typically long-term. You have to have freight arrangements with Class I railroads. Those contracts can be long-term. And you have to have a destination terminal. And a lot of these pieces are very competitive. I mean, you've got the automobiles moving across the country, you've got sand, you've got gravel, you've got grain. We're competing with all of those players as well. It's certainly bigger than just the oil and gas industry. So I think you do see longer term contracts than what any of us probably have done in our histories. I don't know about 10-year contracts. I have not seen that, but there certainly could be. I'm not sure. But I think the planning is more important. And I think that we all work together pretty well on that front because I think we all kind of go with the slogan that rising tide raises all ships. And so I think it's competitive. I think having Salt Lake City is still a competitive market. I think the crude by rail market is maybe just as competitive, maybe more, with lots of different purchasers. So I think we all compete on that front. We're all friends and we do collaborate in some ways, but we also are looking out for our companies, and so we're competitive in a lot of ways.
Yeah, the only other thing I'd add, I agree with all that, is just much of that transportation expense is largely a fixed expense, and that, we also talked about margin earlier, as we think about how to allocate our capital to our various asset areas, we're working really hard to reduce that expense. It's a big dollar line item, but we also, to Matthew's point, we need certainty of getting product to market. And so it's a little bit of figuring out, like, okay, what do we need to do to get our product to market? What do we need to do to try and reduce those expenses? And then how does that impact and compete with how we allocate capital across the country? So
I'll just add a little bit to Matt's point on the complications of the supply chain on the logistics. The one thing, we are competing against every other commodity that's being moved by rail, which is every other commodity, right? But we have this added kind of kink of we've got to have facilities that are capable of handling our waxy crude. And that's just one more cost. It's one more complication that we've got to be really cognizant as we think through where we can ship this waxy crude and pencil that into our economics as well. Okay, we've probably got time for one last question. Reed's coming for a twofer. Go ahead, Reed.
So the next wet gas expansion proposed by Williams is probably going to have like a 3-year lead time for the additional, say, 60,000 that Tyler showed us yesterday. And I think that the previous expansion that some of us are a part of will be filled up potentially in the next like year and a half. Do you guys see that? Is that a fair time frame? And if, or even in 2 years, but how do we get into the next expansion without having to wait and stop drilling for 2 years while you're waiting around between getting full and getting online with the next expansion?
So, kind of a two-parter. It's a great question. I think, as Rikki mentioned earlier, and I think they talked about it yesterday, with Kinder Morgan's expansion, opening their new line, that opens up a lot of the expansion. They've got a lot of gas going down that line right now, and so you pull a lot of that gas off there going down their pipe, and it opens up the existing Williams expansion. That's got a lot of room to go. Again, I'm not going to. I don't know everyone's growth plans. I don't know what that looks like on the western side of the basin where that real relief is, but I don't think there's real risk over the next 3 years of filling that up. I think with compression and things like that, we've got room. Again, I would love for that to be a problem. You know, I don't want to have to shut barrels in, but if that's a problem, that's kind of first world problems for us if we filled that up, I would just say. So I don't see it being a major bottleneck, but you know, I think 3 years is the time frame. I think that's a good thing to know it's coming on the horizon, for sure.
Okay. Well, thank you all for your attention, for your great questions. Let's thank these guys for their leadership and their transparency.